Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. 9700 As Biology March 2021 paper 1-2. We're going to discuss question 22 and question 40 up till question 40 in this second video, which follows the initial video on this paper. With question number 22, which statements about complementary base pairing are correct? Cytosine forms two hydrogen bonds with guanine. No, you remember C and G. And I keep on telling you C is the third letter of the alphabet. So C and G form three bonds. So cytosine forms two hydrogen bonds with guanine. That was incorrect. The rest are all correct. Purines and pyrimids are different sizes. Yes, purines are double ring and pyrimids are single ring. Adenine forms the same number of hydrogens with thymine as it does with uracil. Yes, correct. The base pairs in a molecule of DNA are of equal length and equal width. So 2, 3 and 4 were correct. 1 was wrong. Then coming to question number 23, what are the products when a DNA molecule replicates? Two molecules of DNA each made of a sequence of paired bases. Two molecules of each made of a sequence of paired nucleotides. Two strands of DNA each made of a sequence of paired bases. Two strands of DNA each made of a sequence of paired nucleotides. So what are the products when a DNA molecule replicates? So the answer to that was B, two molecules of DNA, each made of a sequence of paired nucleotides. Please understand what we mean by a DNA molecule. What are the products when a DNA molecule replicates? Then coming to question number 24, which description applies to phloem sieve tube elements and to xylem vessel elements? No cytoplasm, no end walls, no nucleus. Which descriptions apply to phloem sieve tube elements and to xylem vessel elements? So the only thing which was common is, you see, no cytoplasm is only in the xylem. No end walls are only in the xylem. It says which description applies to phloem sieve tube and xylem. So both should be present in xylem and phloem. No nucleus. So 3 was correct. No nucleus. There is no nucleus either in the xylem or the phloem. Then coming to question number 25. Some of the parts of a plant root involved in water transport are listed. Casparian strip, cell walls of cortex, endodermal cells, epidermal cells, xylem vessels. Some of the parts of a plant root involved in water transport are listed. Which sequence shows part of a pathway through water can move across a root? You see, this is the root. This is the root hair cell. And then we have the cells of the cortex. And then you have the endodermis. And then you have the xylem vessel, pericycle, and then the xylem vessel. So cell walls of the cortex cells, endodermal cells, and then the xylem vessel. So 2, 3 and 5, cell walls of the cortex cells. Then the endodermal cells, which are these which I've just shown you. These are the endodermal cells which form this endodermis. And number 5 is the xylem vessel. This is the xylem vessel. So you see, epidermis is outside. This is the root hair cell, is the epidermis layer. This layer outside is the epidermis. But this is, when water from the soil will enter the root hair cell. So number 4 shouldn't have been there. And that was easy for you to figure out. Oh, this was incorrect. Now, part of a plant root involved in water transport, and it says pathway to water can move across a root. Casparian strip blocks it. So move across a strip, so Casparian strip shouldn't be in it because Casparian strip blocks it. It's only the will only go through the symplast pathway. Apoplast pathway will be blocked. Question 26. What is an example of a mass flow system in a plant? The loading of amino acids? No. The movement of water across the root, the movement of sap through the phloem, the movement of water vapor. So you had to really figure this out. Is mass flow is the movement of sap through the phloem sieve tubes in the stem from high pressure to low pressure. So root was wrong. Water vapor from the leaf was wrong. Amino acids loading companion cells, no. So phloem sieve tube, the movement of fluid, it's bulk flow of fluid in the phloem. So that's why the answer B was correct. Then coming on to 27, the diameter of a tree trunk usually decreases slightly during the day. Which changes in environmental factors during the day could cause the diameter to decrease even more? That means more transpiration pull. So increased temperature, increased light intensity, increased humidity. Increased humidity, if the leaf outside, has more humidity and less humidity inside, so what is going to happen? There's going to be no transpiration. If the air outside a leaf is very humid, there's going to be no water vapor gradient. Why would water vapors diffuse out from a low concentration to a high concentration if the humidity is high? So it only had to be increased temperature and increased light intensity, and that's why the answer was A. 28. Which statement about the role of co-transporter proteins in the movement of sucrose is correct? Co-transporter proteins pump hydrogen ions into phloem sieve tubes along with sucrose. Hydrogen ions are pumped out of the companion cells. Hydrogen ions diffuse through cross-transporter proteins with sucrose into the companion cell. This was correct. Plasmodesmata moves sucrose. Sorry, how can plasmodesmata move sucrose? Plasmodesmata is just a connection between the cells. How can they? It's just like a door between two rooms. Sucrose is moved through co-transporter proteins by active transport. Oh, that's a passive way by sucrose moves in back. Hydrogen ions are pumped out and then hydrogen ions move back in, and then of course they co-transport sucrose along with them. There's no active transport in the sucrose movement. The active transport is of the hydrogen ions. Then coming on to question number 29. Which row correctly describes the heart during atrial systole? Now if you remember, systole is always contraction, whether it's ventricular systole or it's atrial systole. So which row correctly describes wall of the ventricle? If the atria is contracting, wall of the ventricle has to be relaxed. Atrioventricular wall has to be open because the atria is contracting, it has to be pushing the blood into. This is the heart. This is the atrium. So if the atria is contracting, blood has to enter the ventricle. So the atrioventricular valve has to open, and this of course the vessel coming out of it should be closed, the semilunar valve. So the vessel coming out of the ventricle, if it's on the right side, is the pulmonary artery. If it's on the left side, is the aorta. So heart during atrial systole, so semilunar valves have to be closed because blood is flowing from the atrium to the ventricle. It can't be going out of the vessel which is leaving the ventricle. So please understand this part of the question. Question 30. The diagram shows a capillary, some tissue cells, and a lymph vessel. So they've shown you a capillary, some tissue cells, and a lymph vessel. Which row correctly identifies arrow 1? This is from the red blood cell. This is something moving into the cells. So it has to be oxygen. So diffusion of oxygen. Then 2 was something coming out of these spaces in the endothelium, the pores in the endothelium of the capillary. And then 3 was something going in from the tissue cells. So that has to be carbon dioxide with the waste which was going back into the blood. You see, in the capillary we have the blood. And then it says 4 was something which was the tissue fluid moving into the lymph vessels. So that is why the answer was C. Getting it all correct. Everybody should have figured that out. That wasn't such a difficult question. Rather simple version of it. Then coming on to question number 31. The table shows the results used to draw an oxygen dissociation curve for adult hemoglobin. Partial pressure of oxygen kPa, volume of oxygen per gram of hemoglobin in centimeter cube per gram. What is the percentage increase in the volume of oxygen per gram of hemoglobin when the partial pressure of oxygen increases from 3 kPa to 5 kPa? You can see the calculation for this. You see what you had is 0.58 from 3 to 5, and 5 kilopascal went to 0.96. So 0.96 minus 0.958 is equal to 0.38. Now 0.38 it is the difference over the original. So 0.38 over 0.58 into 100 is 65.5%. So change over original into 100 would show you the percentage increase. Now this is simple maths which we must know in A-level biology. Question 32. The graph shows the oxygen dissociation curves for adult hemoglobin at 2 carbon dioxide concentrations. So percentage saturation of hemoglobin, partial pressure of oxygen, we have P, Q, S and R. We know when there's more carbon dioxide, it's going to shift to the right. So Q and R is shift to the right. Which letters show measurements taken in the capillaries of the lungs and in the capillaries of the active muscle? Active muscle means more oxygen being consumed, more aerobic respiration, more carbon dioxide being produced. So in the lungs what is happening, and in the active muscles what is happening? So active muscles would always be R. Why? Because there's more carbon dioxide, it shifts to the right. And in the lungs it would be of course 100% saturated, so it will have to be P. Lungs would not have to undergo any increased CO2 storing. So lungs had to be P and active muscles would have to be R. Because it says which letter shows measurements taken in the capillaries of the lungs and the capillaries of the active muscles. So this is how you had to figure this one out. Then coming on to question number 33. Which substances can combine with adult hemoglobin and reduce the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood? Which substances can combine with adult hemoglobin and reduce the oxygen carrying? Is it be carbon dioxide? Will it be carbon monoxide? Will it be hydrogen carbonate ions? Will it be hydrogen ions? So, adult hemoglobin, carbon monoxide forms carboxyhemoglobin. You see, why is it 1, 2, and 4? Why? Because carbon dioxide forms carbaminohemoglobin, carbon monoxide forms carboxyhemoglobin, and hydrogen ions form hemoglobinic acid. Hydrogen carbonate ions is carbon dioxide reacts with water to form carbonic acid and then it dissociates into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. So please understand why it was B, 1, 2 and 4 only. Then coming on to question number 34. How many times must a molecule of carbon monoxide pass through a cell surface membrane as it diffuses from an airspace in an alveolus through a cell in the capillary wall and into a red blood cell? We've done this many times before. This is the alveolus wall. So this has 1 cell thick. Then the capillary is 1 cell thick. And then the red blood cell inside it is of course, so we have 5 membranes that it crosses. One this, one this, one this, one here, and one here. So 5 membranes that it crosses. 5 times it crosses a cell membrane. Please understand that the alveolar wall has a three-dimensional, so twice in an alveolar wall. Then twice in the cell which is lining the endothelium cell, which is the capillary wall. So twice here. And then the red blood cell. So the fifth time. So it crosses 5 times, it crosses a cell membrane. Of course, in the first two instances, like in this one, the alveolar wall is one cell, but it has to enter the cell and then it has to exit the cell. Question 35. The heart rate of a person at rest was recorded at intervals over two 15-minute periods. During the first 5 minutes of the second 15-minute period, the person smoked a cigarette. The graph shows the results recorded during the two 15-minute periods. So smoking for first 5 minutes, we have heart rate, beats per minute, we have not smoking, and we have smoking for the first 5 minutes. Now we look at the graph, it says what can be concluded from the graph. What can be concluded from the graph? And I always say to you is you need to say to yourself, does the graph tell me carbon monoxide affects the heart rate? Does the graph tell me carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin, increasing the flow of blood? Does the graph tell me nicotine increases the heart rate, so is a stimulant? Does the graph tell me that the heart rate increases as a result of smoking? That's it. So whenever it says what can be concluded from the graph, you need to read these answers and say to yourself, does the graph tell me A? And read A. Does the graph tell me that carbon monoxide affects the heart rate? No, I don't know anything. The graph is just telling me smoking for the first thing. What happens? Not smoking, the heart rate remains the same. By smoking for the first 5 minutes, the heart rate goes up and it goes up from 80 to 100 and something. The graph is not telling me anything about carbon monoxide or anything about carbon dioxide or nicotine. We're just assuming things because you're thinking smoking, so you know what cigarette smoking is. So you are concluding things which are not telling you something in the graph. Then coming to question number 36. Emphysema is a type of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. A person with emphysema has difficulties in breathing out. Why does emphysema cause difficulties in breathing out? Why? Because the elasticity of the alveoli decreases. The rest of this is all wrong. Smooth muscle fibers in the airways are destroyed. Too little mucus is produced. Well, that is nothing to do with emphysema. Emphysema is the number of alveoli you see decrease, number of alveoli burst. So all these alveoli burst and now there is less surface area for gas exchange. But why is it says difficulty in breathing out? Basically breathing out is because of the elasticity and that elasticity is gone. Question 37. Which factors contribute to outbreaks of measles after natural disasters? Contamination of drinking water with untreated sewage. This is of course to do with cholera. Lack of effective vaccination coverage in the population before the disaster. And people living in overcrowded conditions. So it was 2 and 3 only. Then coming to question number 38. There are two main classes of antibiotics, broad spectrum and narrow spectrum. Broad spectrum antibiotics affect a wide range of bacteria, so they kill many different types of bacteria. While narrow spectrum antibiotics affect specific types of bacteria, few types of bacteria. Which uses of antibiotics may result in antibiotic resistant bacteria? A broad spectrum antibiotic given to reduce the effects of the influenza virus. Influenza virus, please remember, viruses are not destroyed by antibiotics. Viruses are not bacteria. A broad spectrum antibiotic to treat Mycobacterium tuberculosis in humans. Mycobacterium tuberculosis has specific drugs which we give. A narrow spectrum antibiotic to treat diarrhea and sickness in a cattle. Well, that's not going to work. So this of course is both, all of them, 1, 2 and 3, all of these will cause increase in the antibiotic resistant bacteria. Question number 39. People with autoimmune disease myasthenia gravis can have a treatment to relieve their symptoms. In this treatment, one of the components of the blood is removed. Which blood component is removed? Antibodies. Question 40. Why are spleen cells fused with myeloma cells during monoclonal antibody production? So that we give them immortality. Myeloma is a cancer cell, and the normal B plasma cell is not going to survive. It's not going to, it may survive even, but it's not going to divide by mitosis, because we want them to form a clone, and we want them to keep on dividing and forming, giving us antibodies. So when we fuse it with a cancer cell, myeloma cell is a cancer cell, we give it immortality. And this is what is the main reason, so that they can reproduce indefinitely. That finishes this paper, and I hope this is helpful. Of course, some of the questions have been removed for the 2022 syllabus, especially measles and autoimmune diseases. So these questions you will have to stop doing for the 2022 syllabus. Thank you very much.